Hello students, you are most welcome to this lesson. We're going to learn about, we're going to have CMA, learning about the dangers that befall a person who engages in dangerous activities. Remember, during the previous lesson, we talked about peer pressure. Now, with the peer pressure, we said that a person can be in danger just because of engaging in various groups that may lead that person into danger. Now, what are the things that may lead a person into dangerous activities? Why do people, maybe we shall look upon that later, but giving into peer pressure can lead you into doing bad things, such as, I'm going to mention some few things that some people have found themselves in, they have found themselves doing just because of peer pressure. Number one is about smoking. Number one is smoking. If you happen to ask a person who has been smoking how he or she got into smoking, the answer would probably be peer pressure. It couldn't be something else. Of course, there are some other reasons that I may explain later, but I'm telling you for sure, peer pressure has forced people into smoking. Number two is about using drugs or drug abuse. Using drugs. You ask people who have been in drug addiction, just ask, how did you get into drug abuse? The highest percent will definitely tell you that it's because of peer pressure. I have met a lot of people who have been into such circumstance, into such situation, not because of anything else, but because of peer pressure. But you can also think about being rude. Have you ever seen a person who is rude? Or I may ask you, are you rude? So, being rude. If I may tell you, we're not born to be rude to others. That's not the intention of our creation. We're not created for that. But sometimes you find yourself being rude to your fellows, being rude to your brothers and sisters, your teachers, your relatives, if I may say, not because that's what you really want, but it could be an influence from the peer pressure. Now, I have seen this several times, and I'm trying to differentiate between a person who is raised in such areas where people can just abuse, where they can just answer rudely and so on, and a person who is raised in a very mannered way in a certain area. You might find these guys are behaving differently. But why? It could be because of peer pressure. Now, where do you engage in? Which group do you engage in? It's good to have friends, but where does a group that you are engaging in leading you to? That's a question that you really need to ask yourself. But also, you can think about stealing. I'm sure you have ever heard about robbery people who are breaking into our homes, who are stealing in our streets, and so on. Now, some of them may have not wanted to be thieves or to be robbers, but why do a person get into that? In most cases, it could be peer pressure. Somebody, a friend of yours, might force you, might convince you. At the end of the day, you find yourself stealing. And when your parents maybe are asked or they are informed about you, they may not believe it just because they have not raised you that way. But because you do engage, you do cooperate with a certain group which isn't good, at the end of the day will lead you into such dangers. But we can also have, I know you have heard about it, and you can see people who are drinking or taking alcohol. People who are taking alcohol. Now, the question could be, is taking alcohol a good thing? I may not tell you this time, but try to think and figure out what actions or what happens when a person is has already taken some bottles. Now, think how a person does things when is already. Okay, think about a person who has taken alcohol. You know, it does change his or her thought, changes the mind, drives a person into activities that may not be good to the family or to the community at large. So you can see that engaging yourself into these activities automatically does endanger a person and the people around. So that is to say, it may not be a good thing for a person to engage in such kind of activities. Now, you may ask me, now, what are the impacts? What are the impacts of engaging into smoking, using drugs, being rude, stealing, drinking alcohol, and so on? What could be the impacts? In the course of our discussion, you will conclude yourself. Of course, I may say whatever I can say, but at the end of the day, you may conclude yourself whether it's a good thing or it is not. Now, think about a person who comes home. I'm so sorry if your dad or your mom or some of your relatives are taking alcohol, and because I have ever experienced this, you find somebody comes home maybe at night when you are busy studying or you are resting, you're already in your bed, and somebody comes home and is just drunk, and you see, cannot even use a polite language. You can see somebody is like, hey, open the door. I'm saying open the door. If you don't open, I'm going to break it. It's not a good thing. Now, being into such circumstance, you will make a conclusion yourself whether it is a good thing or it's a bad thing. Some families have been in trouble, have been affected negatively, and the children have lost the direction just because their parents are drunkard. I'm sorry to say this, but because we're living in such kind of communities, I just have to say it. So, of course, you will have to find the solutions on all that we're discussing and all that we are facing in our day-to-day life. But you just need to understand that these are the things that happen in our communities. So, taking alcohol, for example, it does change somebody's mind. A person can be under compulsion. A person may be forced to do something that when he or she is sober would not do. Now, it's because it does influence decision making. Does influence decision making. So a person's decision would be influenced by alcohol. Now you may think something that changes your mind and that you do something that you shouldn't have done. I wonder whether it's something that you should do or you shouldn't. Being rude and lack of respect to elders is something that might be a result of maybe things like using drugs, being rude, and lack of respect. Now, tell me, have you ever seen a person who is a real drunk and a person who is using drugs, who is addicted by these drugs? These people do not behave like a normal person. They don't behave that just like we do. You know the reason? It's because it does affect somebody's brain. So sometimes one might be forced to do something very silly just because one is out of mind. So you might find somebody is becoming very rude, somebody is misbehaving, doesn't respect people. Now it may not be because of another reason than having been affected by drugs. When it comes to smoking, I know you're able to read and you have ever seen a cigarette, for example. The manufacturers, they do write, cigarette smoking is dangerous to your health. What does it affect? You see, when you take in that smoke, it does go to your lungs. So it does affect lungs. And if it does affect the lungs, that is to say, somebody might end up having lung cancer. And if you have lung cancer, that is to say, your lifespan might be shortened. So you may not live long just because of smoking. Now, is smoking a good thing? You have the answer. You can tell me whether it is a good thing or it is not a good thing. If I may say, smoking is not a good thing at all, and it has been advised and it has been even written there. That means if you are reading, you have to understand. You have to just abstain from smoking cigarette or smoking cigars. But also, um, okay, sometimes we have been experiencing immoral dressing codes. You see, during the previous lessons, I said we're not raised, and especially when I was talking about the social studies, talking about our customs and traditions, I said it's very surprising to see a person who is exposing most especially ladies, exposing most of their body parts. When one is passing by, everybody will be wondering. You know why? It's not because we're not raised in such kind of culture, such kind of communities that do have such traditions and customs. So sometimes you may just conclude yourself that this is immoral dressing code, or it is a good dressing code, having knowing what is good and what is bad. So it's very important that we dress nicely. Sometimes you see we have heard about the people who, most especially girls, who are raped. They are raped because of their dressing styles. Some people, men are dangerous. So it's dangerous to expose most of your body parts. It's dangerous. You just have to be keen. Now you take an example of the royal wedding ceremonies that have been taking place. For example, in the UK, for example, I tried to watch when Prince Charles was getting married. You find all the invitees, all people who are invited in such wedding, everybody is well dressed. Whether you are a lady or you are a gentlemen and ladies, they were all well dressed. And I have been following. Why don't they dress anyhow? They do dress nicely. They cover most of their body parts. Why is it so? It's because of showing respect. That is to say, we just have to dress in a good way that shows good morals. Now, just allow me to wrap the blackboard as we see some practices that can influence and motivate a person to abstain from dangerous activities. Practices that can influence and motivate a person to abstain from dangerous activities. How can you help a person who has been in such activities? Number one, of course, you will have to provide information, or I may say education. One has to be educated on the dangers of such activities. So, number one is about provision of education. Provision of education. A person has to be aware that it is very dangerous because one may harm him or herself and the whole community just because of engaging in such dangerous acts. So, having educating a person and one gets to know that, so this is bad, then somebody might try to avoid it. But number two, having talked about peer pressure, you will obviously have to avoid dangerous groups. Avoiding dangerous groups. Now, when I say you have to avoid dangerous groups, I mean that you have to keep a good company. It's obvious that good company builds you up, builds you and it helps you to become a good person. But if you have bad company, they will just ruin you. You have to remain, if you're a good person, you have to remain a good person. And how can you do that? You will have to keep a good company. You know, gangs do rely on peer pressure to do bad things. So sometimes one may invite you to such a group, and if you, because they might be your friends, you buy the idea, you find yourself doing some bad things just because of keeping bad company. So for you to remain a good person, a good child, a good boy, a good girl, you have to keep a good company. People around you. I do not say that we don't have such bad people in our community. Yeah, they are there. But just because you know the impacts, especially negative impacts of keeping bad company, you just have to avoid them. There is no another way out. Just run away from them. This will help you to become and remain a good person. But I know most of you, if I may say, everybody does believe through a certain religion. So we do follow religious teachings, and it's a good thing, a wonderful thing that Right Way has been doing, that every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning before we go for classes, we have morning devotion. That is a very good thing because it builds you up. It helps you to remain a good person because of the fear of God. So, if you're a Christian, you have to remain and you have to abide in Christian teachings. If you're a Muslim, you have to abide in Muslims' teachings. And if you are, maybe, we have got the Buddhist and many others, just abide on what you believe in. Remain there. Follow the teachings. These will help you and you will remain a good person. So, following religious teachings. Following religious teachings. Following religious teachings. You will agree with me, if you are a Muslim or you are a Christian, you will agree with me that both of these religions, they do teach good manners. Nowhere in either of the two and many others, they will teach you that you have to do some bad things. Never. It's never there. It's never there. You just have to believe me. So, why is it so? It's because everybody believes that it's a good thing to do some good stuffs. So you have to follow religious teachings, but also practices that prohibit people to engage in any kind of activity that harm you and the people around that should just be left aside. But you can also report to the police. Report. Report to the police. I know you have got access to the police. Maybe you want to call, there is an urgent call. We have got several numbers that we gave you before. 112, you know what it means. 113, you know what it means. These will help you to contact these people and they can help you out just to to be free from any kind of danger. So every time you are in problem, maybe you cannot report, you are not in a position that you can report it to your parents or report it to your teachers. You can simply ask for help from any other person that you trust. So you think you cannot have access to maybe a mobile phone and call the police, you can still find a person around that may help you out. But it is very important that you report any act that can harm people so that suspects could be taken to the court. At the end of the day, you live, or we live, in peace and harmony. So I will take you back to what we have been discussing. I will take you back there. We have been talking about dangers that befall a person who engages in dangerous activities, and we have said that it is not even a good thing to engage in such activities. We talked about smoking, we talked about drug addiction, we talked about alcoholism, we talked about stealing, and so on. Please kindly be reminded that you should avoid these things. They will never help you in your life. In the end of the day, you might find yourself in problems. You might find yourself affecting your mental stability. You might be affected psychologically. You see, sometimes there has been several acts like a murder. For example, somebody may kill people or may kill him or herself. Now, when you try to find out how this happened, you find it's because of several things that has been going on that have probably affected somebody's brain. In the end, somebody is ending up his life just because of these dangerous acts. But we have also seen practices that can influence and motivate a person to abstain from dangerous activities. So you can be in a good position to help a person, to help your fellows who have been in such problems. You can help them out that they may be safe. We talked about the provision of education. You can educate them, you can help them to understand that it is such a bad thing to engage in dangerous activities because they may harm themselves and they can harm the community at large. We have talked about avoiding dangerous groups, following religious teachings, reporting to the police, and so on and so forth. That will be the end of our lesson. Until next time, I wish you all the best. May God bless you. Bye-bye.